Hi there and welcome to Ticker Climate. My name is Holly Stearns. It's great to have you tuning in. Now, each week on Ticker Climate, we tackle the climate crisis that is facing our planet and we examine what actions governments and corporations need to take. So we're speaking with key people investigating this ever-evolving space. Now, my co-host, Scott Hamilton, is a climate change and energy expert, as well as an author, researcher and policy advisor. Scott, great to see you every single week.
Hello, Holly. Great to be here again.
Now, let's get right into it. This week, our guest is climate activist from coal country and Tesla enthusiast Daniel Bleakley. Daniel, it's great to have your company.
Great. Thanks for having me, Holly.
I wanted to kick things off, if you could just give us a little synopsis, a little bit about your career and your background, just to kick us off.
Yeah, so I grew up in a coal mining community in central Queensland, right in the heart of the Bowen Basin. It's the closest town to the Adani mine. And I studied mechanical engineering in Queensland. I ran a business for a few years, and the last couple of years I've been a very active climate activist.
And there was important breaking news today, Daniel, with Selwyn Hart, Senior Advisor to the United Nations Secretary General, essentially saying that the world has to close its coal-fired power plants by 2030 in terms of the developed world, and the rest of the world by 2040. Now, that means we need to move fast. So how do you think we're placed here in Australia for that kind of shift?
I think that we are able to shift much faster than what we are being led to believe. So a lot of conservative politicians who often are associated with the fossil fuel industry have been saying for decades that it's going to take decades for us to complete this transition, and that is just not true. We can change our industries over much faster than what we're led to believe, and a lot of people believe that it's possible to make the shift even by 2025, and we've seen in the past that humans are able to make dramatic shifts in their society, in their industry within just a couple of years, and for taking action on climate, it's really no different.
Yeah, and Daniel, I mean, I think if everyone's seen them, anyone that follows you, we love your videos showing coal workers the Tesla electric cars. Now, Australia has been very slow at the uptake of EVs and pushing back against closing coal plants, but the federal government is even bringing in the Coal Keeper program to keep them open. Do you think Australia is up for this, and what are the next steps here?
I think we're definitely up for this, and even already without government subsidies on electric vehicles, we've just heard that the July electric vehicle sales are up 400% on July last year in Australia, which is, so we're getting 4 times the amount of EV sales this July than compared with last July, and that's basically without any government incentives. So once the government does start providing subsidies and providing incentives for people to buy electric vehicles, we're going to see that the demand or the uptake of EVs skyrocket. And yeah, we know Australians are very keen to buy electric vehicles. They're still just a little bit expensive, but we know that countries like Norway heavily incentivize and subsidize EVs and have reaped the benefits from that, with having uptakes around 70 or 80% of new cars.
Yeah, we know Nordic countries, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, they're all really ahead in that space, aren't they? Now, speaking of electric vehicles, not everyone can afford to buy a Tesla. So what about the workers and families in coal regions?
Well, funnily enough, coal miners are probably more able to buy electric vehicles than people in cities. Often real estate is a lot cheaper in these communities, and coal miners do make a lot of money. The average coal miner is probably earning over $100,000. So they're well placed to be able to afford these cars. For people who are on lower incomes, there are other options. There's a company in Hobart called the Good Car Co, which sells second-hand Nissan Leafs imported from Japan, and generally they're around $20,000, and you can have an electric vehicle. On top of that, Tesla will be bringing out an even cheaper car in the next couple of years. It's speculated that within 2 years, Tesla will announce a $25,000 US kind of hatchback car. So the cost curve is coming down very quickly, and yeah, we're going to see within a couple of years it's going to be a complete no-brainer to buy an EV.
Yeah, exciting stuff. I can't wait. Scott, you also grew up in the coal region of Latrobe Valley. What do you think this means for these kind of communities, and what needs to be done, do you think?
Yeah, well, that's the bit that I am really concerned about, Holly, because the change, as Daniel said, is happening almost in spite of the federal government not having a climate or an energy policy, and essentially that the world is moving. And so what is happening and going to continue to happen, we saw it with Hazelwood Power Station a few years ago, we're going to see these coal-fired power stations closing, and that's not going to be managed. And I'm really concerned about towns like Latrobe Valley, like the Hunter Valley, like Gladstone, like Port Kembla, because they're going to be left high and dry, and they'll be decimated as these power stations close. And things like the Coal Keeper program, which is actually payments to the coal companies, well, that's not for the workers. That'll go into the parent companies, and they'll take those money, and mostly it'll go overseas, a lot of it as well.
Daniel, you've been a vocal critic before of people who are rorting the federal government's JobKeeper program. Can you just explain to us what your problem is there, and just, I guess, elaborate a little bit for us on this?
Yeah, so, I mean, it's known now that around $13 billion of JobKeeper has gone to companies which didn't qualify for it, companies whose profits were actually increasing, were able to get huge amounts of public money. Now, Scott's absolutely right that we need to look after the fossil fuel workers during the transition, and the government can do that. For $13 billion, say that there's around 40,000 coal miners in Australia. Now, for just $4 billion a year, you could pay every coal miner in the country $100,000 salary to not dig coal, like if you wanted to. So for $13 billion, you could pay every coal miner in the country $100,000 a year for three years as a support payment during the transition. So the transition to clean technology, it's never been about jobs. The coal workers have been completely politicised to protect the profits of the people at the top of the coal industry, the people who own the coal industry. So the government has plenty of capacity to support every coal worker, every fossil fuel worker in the country through the transition to clean technology.
Yeah, and just on that, Daniel, when will the government, I guess, start to hear these kind of opinions like yours now? When will they start to act on this, or will they ever act on it?
Well, that's the multi-billion-dollar question, Holly, and it seems like they never will, because we know that there are many elected officials in government, in the Liberal Party, in the National Party, and in the Labor Party with close connections to the coal, oil, and gas industry. So they represent coal, oil, and gas companies ahead of the workers and ahead of citizens. So it's difficult for me to imagine the current government actually taking action, perhaps with more international pressure. We've seen a lot of international pressure over the last few months. Perhaps they will be forced to take action. But if not, then we need to change the government at the next election. And that means voting in parties and independents with extremely strong climate policy.
Yeah, just building on that, Daniel, that $13 billion, you could do things like build green steel plants and actually use it to start manufacturing electric vehicles, or more electric vehicles here in this part of the world, rather than giving that money to companies that are selling washing machines and things from overseas. We could be investing in manufacturing again here and really get the jobs happening in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mentioned this last week, but Tesla is a manufacturing revolution. Tesla is driving the third industrial revolution, and Tesla's philosophy is to minimize the distance traveled of each atom in the manufacturing process. So with that philosophy, it would mean that it would be advantageous for Tesla to have a battery factory in or near the sources of lithium and nickel which go into their batteries. Now, 70% of Tesla's lithium and 40% of Tesla's nickel actually already comes from Australia. So logistically, and to save on shipping costs and emissions, shipping emissions, it would make a lot of sense for Tesla to set up a battery factory here in Australia, so that we're not shipping ore, which is a lot heavier, but we're actually shipping final product in the form of batteries, refined product, to get the weights down, to get the shipping costs down and the emissions down, and therefore that also translates into a reduction in cost of the battery packs, which translates into a reduction of cost of electric vehicles. So the Australian government should be pitching to get a battery factory built here in Australia, if nothing else, but to set us up for a positive economic future.
Yes, and really strong points. Really strong points that you've made there.
Sorry, Holly. If we've still got time, these shows always go very, very quickly. But I did see in the news today, Daniel, I don't know whether you noticed it, but the Adelaide Advertiser, there was a full-page ad from a range of different companies, including the Electric Vehicle Council, Mitsubishi, Volkswagen, basically saying that the South Australian government shouldn't be bringing in essentially a tax on electric vehicles. Now, do you know much about this, and what are your thoughts on it?
I didn't see that that ad, but I was aware that the South Australian government is looking at bringing in an electric vehicle tax or a road user tax, which only applies to electric vehicles, which is what Victoria has done as well. And to be honest, that is absolutely crazy. We need to be incentivizing electric vehicles. We need to reduce the cost and actually subsidize EVs so that we can ramp up the uptake. Now, New South Wales also announced that they will be introducing a road user tax. But I don't think it's until either 2027 or until 30%, until we reach 30% of new vehicles as EVs. Now, at the moment, Australia is around 1% of new cars are electric vehicles. We need to incentivize that, ramp up the uptake of EVs, and then we can start looking at bringing in these road user taxes. But at the moment, we shouldn't have any taxes on electric vehicles. In fact, we should be heavily subsidising them.
Now, Daniel, lastly, before we wrap things up, you've said before that you've had a gutful. I hate to put you on the spot here. What are you thinking about when you say that?
Well, I think that really applies to activism, and I'm trying to encourage more people to become more vocal and more active with their demands on government to take the climate crisis seriously. We need more people to stand up and take action against this government, and that means joining local climate groups or non-violent civil disobedience. So when I say I've had a gutful, we've all really had a gutful of decades of inaction in this country, and we know that Australia can be doing so much more. And as young people, we want to have a positive future, and we want the opportunities that the third industrial clean tech revolution is going to bring. So, yeah, like many other people, I have had a gutful, and I'm hoping that more and more people will join the global climate movement to pressure our governments to take serious action.
Really powerful words there, Daniel. I want to thank you so much for coming on to Ticker Climate. It's great to have your insight on these topics. Scott, I'm sure you've loved it as well. Absolutely. Thank you very much, Daniel. Take care. And that's all we have time for on Ticker Climate. Thank you to Scott and Daniel. Until next time.